Imagine this: the deadliest beast in the galaxy, an apex predator that even warlords tremble before, stands chained in a council arena. Aliens from a dozen worlds whisper, waiting to see which war chief will bend it to his will. But none of them expect what's about to happen. If you want to see how this plays out, don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment with your theories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Now, let's step into the chamber where fear has a voice of its own. The arena was designed to intimidate. Its walls rose high, lined with steel that shimmered beneath the glare of floodlights, and every seat was filled with alien dignitaries and generals who had traveled light years for this demonstration. The air smelled of scorched metal and ozone, a sharpness that clung to the back of the throat. At the center of the ring, tethered by chains thicker than a man's torso, crouched the predator. Its hide was dark as night, its eyes molten amber, glowing like coals that refused to die. The creature didn't fidget, didn't strain against its bonds. It simply watched, still as a blade waiting to be drawn. The war chiefs were restless. Massive saurian overlords with crests of bone, insectoid strategists with clicking mandibles, scaled commanders with war paint scrawled across their hides. They had all come for one purpose: to prove dominance over the beast that had shattered fleets and left battlefields littered with corpses. Each one coveted the glory of taming it, of binding it to their command. Counselors whispered in the galleries above. A century of attempts had failed. Some said the beast was ungovernable. Others claimed the right hand had not yet tried. Still others murmured that perhaps the predator was more than animal, perhaps it was closer to a god. From the lower entrance, a figure stepped into the light. He was almost unremarkable against the alien spectacle. Human, lean but hardened, wearing the matte black fatigues of a soldier long out of uniform. His name was Captain Elias Ward, though here he was little more than an invited observer, a mercenary whose contract was signed not for action but for witness. The aliens tolerated him as a curiosity, a primitive primate given a seat at the edge of history. Ward's eyes swept the chamber with the cold appraisal of someone who had seen ambushes in desert ruins and firefights in neon-lit streets. He registered exits, counted rifles, gauged the height of the walls. It was habit, not hope, for he had no place in this performance. He was meant to sit, to record, to confirm when the predator was finally mastered. The first war chief entered the ring. His armor clanged with each stride, crimson plates etched with symbols of conquest. He carried a psionic staff, its crystal pulsing in rhythm with his thoughts. The crowd hushed as he leveled the weapon toward the predator. "Bow," he commanded, his voice echoing through the translation arrays. Energy rippled, invisible but heavy, pressing against the mind of every spectator. Several weaker counselors winced as though struck. The predator did not bow. It blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion, and the glow in its eyes brightened. Then, without warning, it yanked its head, snapping a chain taut until the link screamed under the strain. The war chief snarled, pressing harder with his psionic command. The beast lunged, jaws parting, and in one violent snap, the chain broke free from the floor. The chief barely threw up his shield in time as the predator's claws raked sparks across the barrier. Gasps erupted through the chamber. Guards leveled rifles. Counselors shouted. The chief staggered back, staff trembling in his hands. For all his power, his command was smoke against fire. The second war chief tried, then a third. One used sonic whips that made the walls quiver. Another flooded the air with pheromones designed to subdue lesser creatures. The predator tore through every attempt. Each effort ended the same, with the war chief retreating, humiliated, while the predator tested its bonds inch by inch, link by link. Ward watched without moving, though his pulse quickened. He had seen wild animals before, seen the raw edge of danger in their eyes. The predator was no different. It wasn't enraged for the sake of rage. It was measuring, learning, waiting. Predators on Earth didn't waste energy, they struck when the moment was right. This one was waiting for its chance. The chains groaned. Metal anchors tore from the stone floor, and suddenly the predator was free. The arena erupted in chaos. Guards fired stun lances, energy bolts flashing like lightning. Counselors screamed and fled the balconies. The war chiefs shouted orders, but the beast moved faster than commands could travel. It leapt, crushed a guard beneath its claws, swatted a sonic cannon aside as if it were made of paper. Ward was on his feet before he knew it, instincts driving him. He didn't reach for his rifle. Against something like this, it was pointless. Instead, he raised his hands slowly, palms open, body lowered. Not submission, not fear, but the universal language of non-threat. His voice was steady, quiet. "Easy. You don't want me, do you?" The predator froze. Amber eyes locked onto him, a molten furnace that seemed to burn through flesh and bone. It was close enough that Ward could see the scars along its jaw, old wounds from battles it must have survived long before this chamber. Its breath came in hot waves, smelling of iron and smoke. One twitch of those jaws and he would be gone. But it didn't strike. Instead, it inhaled deeply as though tasting his scent. The growl in its throat lowered, softened, and then faded. The guards held their fire, terrified of hitting the wrong target. The war chiefs watched in disbelief, their weapons raised yet useless. Ward held still, heartbeat drumming against his ribs. His every muscle screamed to move, to escape, but he did not flinch. He simply stared back, steady and unyielding. The predator blinked once more and then, it stepped back. The chamber went silent. The war chiefs could not believe what they were seeing. This beast that had torn apart armies, that refused command from every species represented in the council, had spared the human. Worse, it seemed to acknowledge him. Ward let out a slow breath. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He only thought one thing, the same thought that had carried him through ambushes, deserts and black ops missions that no one would ever admit happened. Stay alive, find the angle, wait for the next move. Around him, panic lingered but eyes turned. Every gaze, alien, fearful, hateful, now rested on him. The chains hung shattered on the floor. The predator crouched once more but not in defiance. This time, it crouched beside him, its glowing eyes fixed on the guards who dared aim their rifles his way. The council chamber no longer belonged to the war chiefs. It belonged to the predator. And for reasons none of them could yet understand, the predator had chosen not to kill the human standing before it. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile, until one counselor whispered the words that would ripple through the galaxy. It follows him. The stillness inside the chamber was deceptive, a brittle calm masking the storm brewing behind every alien eye. None of the war chiefs spoke, though the hum of their translation arrays ticked faintly, searching for words that would not come. The predator's rumble broke the silence, a sound low and resonant, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. Its stance was no longer feral. It no longer strained against chains or snapped its jaws in defiance. Instead, it stood just behind Elias Ward, looming but not threatening, as if waiting for his cue. The soldiers along the wall shifted uneasily. Fingers rested against trigger guards, mandibles clicked in suppressed panic, tails twitched against armored plating. Every calculation drilled into their training screamed that the human should be ash by now, his bones scattered like the others who had dared come near the beast. And yet he remained, breathing steadily, hands lowered but ready. Ward knew better than to move too quickly. Predators tested, always tested. The fact it had spared him once did not guarantee it would again. One war chief finally broke the silence. His crest of bone rattled as he jabbed his staff toward Ward. "Seize them both," he shouted, his voice sharp with outrage. The order cracked through the chamber like a whip. The predator's roar was immediate. It was not the uncontrolled rage of before but a precise sound, measured and deafening. Guards staggered, some clutching at their ears, others stumbling back from the sheer force of it. Rifles clattered to the floor. The beast's eyes glowed brighter, casting Ward in amber light. Without raising a claw, it had made its answer clear. Approach the human and you invite death. Ward exhaled slowly. He had no illusions. This was not control. This was tolerance, fragile and uncertain. The beast was choosing to defend him, at least for now. What? That question lodged in his mind like a splinter. He replayed the moments, his stance, his words, the way he had refused to flinch. Maybe it recognized courage. Maybe it recognized restraint. Either way, it was enough to stay alive another minute, and another was all he needed. When the council chamber finally erupted in debate, Ward was escorted, reluctantly and under a storm of glares, to the outer corridors. No one dared separate him from the predator. The creature followed silently, claws clicking against the polished stone floor, its bulk bending the air around it. Guards trailed behind, their weapons lowered though their eyes never left the human and his unlikely shadow. By the time Ward reached the holding bay, he could hear the voices already rising against him. Through the glass of the command gallery, war chiefs argued viciously, their voices sharp and overlapping. Some demanded his immediate execution, claiming the predator would surely turn on him once its curiosity waned. Others whispered about weaponizing the bond, turning both man and beast into a living spearhead. The counselors, divided and terrified, kept their distance from one another as though fear itself might be contagious. Ward was given a small chamber, though given was hardly the word. It was more like confinement, a sterile cell dressed up as quarters. The predator crouched at the far end, its massive frame pressed into the shadows, watching everything. Ward sat opposite, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, studying it in turn. Neither moved for a long while. "You're not just muscle, are you?" he murmured finally, voice barely louder than a breath. "You're thinking. Choosing." The predator tilted its head, a motion eerily deliberate. Ward's gut clenched. He had seen eyes like that before, in wolves watching their prey, in trained dogs assessing commands. But this gaze held a sharper edge, as though behind those amber flames lived a mind capable of weighing, even judging. Memory slipped through him unbidden. A desert mission years back, his unit stranded without transport, supplies dwindling. Wolves had shadowed their camp at night. The men were terrified. Ward had done the unthinkable then too, walked toward the pack without raising his weapon, placing scraps of rations on the sand. The wolves had watched him, circled, then retreated. Not friendship, not trust, but respect enough to keep distance. He'd learned something in those nights, that predators recognize more than fear. They recognize intent. The hiss of the chamber doors pulled him from the memory. Two figures entered, flanked by cautious guards. One was a towering insectoid war chief, eyes glittering like shards of obsidian. The other was a leaner figure, scales shimmering with blue-green hues. Their postures dripped with disdain, though they dared not step too close to the predator. "You will tell us what trick you used," the scaled one demanded, voice vibrating through the translator with a rasp. "The beast answers you. It must answer us." Ward's lips twitched at the corner, not in humor but in bitterness. "It doesn't answer me," he said. "It doesn't answer anyone. You saw it. It chose not to kill me. That's all." The insectoid leaned forward, mandibles clacking. "Then make it choose again. Command it. Prove your words." Ward stared at them both, then at the predator, which remained crouched and silent. His instincts screamed to refuse, but his mind understood the danger. They would never accept uncertainty. If he claimed the predator was uncontrollable, they would kill it. If he claimed mastery, they would enslave both of them. Either way, blood would spill. He rose slowly, not breaking eye contact with the beast. "It doesn't follow commands," he said, voice low and deliberate. "It follows respect. That's the only law it knows." The war chiefs scoffed, disgust flashing across their faces. "A primitive philosophy," one sneered. "Respect does not win wars. Obedience does." Ward didn't reply. He kept his gaze on the predator, and in that silence something subtle passed between them. The creature shifted its weight, lowering its head ever so slightly, a gesture that sent a shiver down the spine of every witness. The war chiefs recoiled as though scorched. Without another word, they stormed from the chamber, hissing threats of consequence. The guards lingered longer, their uncertainty written in every twitch of their weapons. But they too eventually left. Ward remained standing for a long time, staring at the beast that had, for reasons he could not yet fathom, decided to mirror him. His shoulders eased just a fraction. "You're with me, aren't you?" he whispered. The predator's throat rumbled, a sound not unlike an approving growl, and though it was impossible to translate, the meaning was clear enough. That night rumors spread like fire. Servants whispered through the corridors, soldiers murmured in their barracks. The tale grew with every telling, the predator bowing to a human, the human speaking words that made it obey. By dawn, the story had reached ships docked at orbit and markets scattered across distant colonies. Some called it a sign of human cunning. Others claimed sorcery. Most simply feared it. Ward lay awake on the narrow cot, sleep a stranger to him. He knew stories could become more dangerous than any weapon. He could already feel the weight of eyes that would not forgive this accident of survival. The beast's breathing filled the chamber, slow and steady, like the rhythm of a drum that no one else could hear. He turned his head toward it, the question gnawing deeper than before. Was it protector, partner, or executioner in waiting? For now it didn't matter. Survival was a gift bought minute by minute, and Ward had no intention of wasting it. When the chamber doors hissed open again, heralding new footsteps, he already knew his fragile reprieve was over. The council would not allow uncertainty to stand. The real trial was about to begin. The council chamber was no longer a place of judgment but a furnace of fury. Voices rose from every tier, shouting accusations, warnings, and demands until the echoes blurred into a single roar. The image of the predator crouched behind Elias Ward had been broadcast to the wider halls, and already whispers turned to shouts. The human had done what no alien commander could. The humiliation was unbearable. The war chiefs were not accustomed to failure, and certainly not to being outshone by a species they considered backward. Ward stood at the edge of the dais, flanked by guards who no longer dared raise their weapons. The predator sat at his heel, eyes glowing faintly in the low light, its breathing deep and steady. The contrast between its calm and the chaos around it was almost absurd. Counselors jabbed fingers, war chiefs slammed fists against stone, yet the beast remained composed, as if confident the human would weather the storm as it did. Amid the tumult, a voice cut through, softer yet commanding. From the opposite archway walked a man in a slate-gray coat, hair silver at the temples, eyes bright with restless intelligence. Dr. Marcus Hale, xenobiologist, Ward's former comrade from campaigns that had ended before either of them wanted. Ward had not expected to see him here. Hale gave the smallest nod, acknowledgement rather than greeting, and then addressed the council. "You're all asking the wrong question," he said. His voice carried effortlessly, woven with conviction. Not why the predator follows the human, but what it reveals by doing so. The chamber quieted enough for his words to take root. Ward shifted uneasily. Hale was brilliant, but brilliance in this place was as dangerous as blood. "The predator has resisted every attempt at domination," Hale continued. "Not because it is untamable but because you misunderstand it. You believe it is beast when it may well be something closer to kin. Look at it, observe its restraint, its responses. This is no mindless weapon. It chooses. That choice is the very proof of intelligence." The war chiefs bristled. To suggest the creature was sapient was heresy to their doctrine of mastery. If the predator was a person, then every attempt to chain it had been a crime of slavery, not strategy. Ward muttered under his breath, "You're going to get yourself killed, Marcus." Hale heard but didn't stop. His gaze shifted to Ward. And it chose him. Not because he commanded, not because he broke it, but because it recognized something familiar. Respect. Mutuality. Perhaps even the capacity for loyalty. The predator's low growl filled the pause as if punctuating his argument. A war chief slammed his staff to the floor, sparking a flare of energy. "Lies. This is human propaganda. The beast has been tricked and snared by primitive instinct." He pointed at Ward, fury sharp enough to cut. "Remove the man, and the beast will follow the rightful hand of command." Ward straightened. "Try and you'll see what it follows." The challenge burned in the chamber like oil on water. Guards shifted nervously, uncertain whether to act. Counselors whispered frantic calculations. The weight of the predator's steady gaze anchored them all, an unspoken threat. Later, in the dim confines of the observation deck, Ward leaned against the railing while Hale joined him. The predator stood below in the holding pit, silent but alert, its eyes never leaving them. "You always did find trouble in the worst places," Hale said. Ward smirked faintly. "Didn't think you'd be here. Thought you hung up the lab coat after everything." "I thought so too," Hale admitted, his voice lower now. "But when the council spoke of an apex predator they couldn't tame, I knew I had to see it. And when I heard you were here, well, it made a certain kind of sense." Ward's expression darkened. "They're not going to let this go. You saw their faces. Humiliated men with armies behind them. They'll kill me to prove it was an accident." "Then you need to decide what you are," Hale said. "Because right now, Elias, you're not just a man who survived. You're a symbol. And symbols don't get to live quietly." The weight of that truth pressed harder than any chain. Ward didn't want the role, but the predator had already made the choice for him. The galaxy would never unsee what it had witnessed. Their conversation was cut short by alarms. Red light bathed the corridors as sirens wailed. Ward rushed back to the pit in time to see the assault unfold. A strike team of armored soldiers had stormed the chamber, rifles glowing with charged rounds. The war chiefs had acted faster than he anticipated, gambling everything on seizing the predator before the bond could solidify. "Down?" Ward barked, though the order was unnecessary. The predator was already in motion. Bullets of energy ricocheted off the walls as it leapt, swatting attackers like insects, jaws snapping through armor with grotesque finality. One soldier screamed before vanishing beneath the creature's claws. Another fired point blank only to be ripped in half a heartbeat later. Ward dove for cover, but when a soldier aimed at him from the flank, the predator intercepted, taking the blast across its shoulder. The impact scorched hide but did not slow it. The beast tore through the line, scattering the survivors who scrambled for retreat. When silence fell again, only bodies and scorched stone remained. The predator lowered itself beside Ward, panting, wounded but alive. The message was unmistakable. It had chosen to protect him, again even at cost to itself. Hale knelt by the wound, examining the burn. "It could have ignored you." Let them cut you down. But it didn't. Do you see, Elias? This isn't chance. This is intent. Ward stared at the predator, chest heaving. If that's true, then we're both in deeper than I thought. Word of the failed seizure spread even faster than before. To the oppressed races scattered across the Council's dominion, the story became more than rumor. It became a rallying cry. The beast that resisted every master had chosen a human. To them it meant defiance was possible. To them it meant the untamable could be an ally. By the time Ward realized the tide shifting, it was too late. Rebel factions reached out, smuggling messages through shadowed networks. They spoke of uprisings, of throwing off chains, of fighting with the human and his beast as their standard. The Council branded Ward a traitor. Assassination squads were dispatched. Declarations of war filled the comm channels. But with every threat, more desperate voices whispered in his direction. Ward stood with Hale in the chamber where the predator rested, the echoes of distant rebellion rising in their ears. The creature lifted its head, amber eyes gleaming, as though it too understood the storm about to break. "You didn't ask for this," Hale said quietly. "No one ever does," Ward replied. He rested a hand against the railing, gaze locked with the predator's. "But if they're coming for me anyway, I won't go down alone." The predator rumbled, deep and resonant, and for the first time Ward thought it sounded less like a growl and more like an agreement. The next summons from the Council would not be a debate. It would be war. The war arrived not with a declaration but with fire. Entire sectors burned in silence before transmissions of surrender could reach the stars. The Galactic Council had abandoned pretense. Elias Ward and the Predator had become the fulcrum on which loyalty now balanced, and the war chiefs meant to snap it in one crushing blow. Ward stood on the command deck of a stolen frigate, watching enemy fleets carve through rebel defenses like knives through cloth. Ships burned bright in the void, their wreckage trailing across orbit like dying constellations. The Predator crouched behind him, restless, its claws scraping faint lines in the steel floor. It hated confinement, hated the ship's narrow hulls, but it stayed close, its molten eyes never leaving him. Marcus Hale pored over tactical displays, his voice steady despite the grim projections. "Their numbers are overwhelming. They've committed dreadnoughts to the front. If they break through, every rebel system falls in days." Ward tightened his jaw. "Then we don't let them break through." The Predator rumbled as if echoing his defiance. The first true clash came on the ground. The Council's legions descended on a rebel colony, armored walkers grinding across ash plains, drones filling the skies. Ward led the counter-assault, boots sinking into scorched soil, rifle slung but rarely used. Where the Predator fought, no weapon seemed necessary. It surged into enemy lines like living thunder, tearing apart machines that dwarfed its frame, snapping steel limbs like twigs. Soldiers scattered before its roar, their formations collapsing into chaos. Ward moved with it, issuing crisp orders to human and alien rebels alike. He wasn't their general, but they obeyed him all the same. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, a shadow weaving between artillery fire and smoke, always where he was most needed. The Predator responded to his movements as if they were bound by invisible thread. When Ward advanced, it cleared the path. When he faltered, it shielded him with its bulk. Hale worked behind the lines, coordinating supply runs, analyzing Council tactics. Yet even he was drawn into the myth forming around them. Soldiers spoke of the man and the beast, as though they were one, their bond the axis on which battles turned. To the rebels, they were no longer just survivors. They were proof that the Council could be beaten. But the Council adapted. The rival war chief who had failed to tame the Predator now returned at the head of a fleet, rage sharpened into obsession. He unveiled a weapon born of forbidden laboratories, a bioengineered monster, towering and grotesque, bred to match the Predator in strength and savagery. It was loosed upon the battlefield like a nightmare-given form. Ward first saw it emerge through the smoke, six-legged, plated in chitin that glistened under artillery fire, eyes glowing with psionic fury. Its roar shook the plain, drowning even the thunder of bombardments. Rebels faltered, and for the first time Ward felt the Predator tense beside him, not with eagerness but with wary recognition. The two titans collided. The earth itself quaked as claws met armored carapace, as fangs sank into plated flesh. The Predator fought with primal ferocity, but the engineered beast struck with unnatural precision, every motion guided by its war chief's psionic leash. Ward shouted orders to keep soldiers clear, but the duel consumed everything around it. Ward's instinct screamed at him to act. He sprinted through the chaos, weaving between collapsing barricades, until he was close enough to shout over the din, "You're not alone," he bellowed, voice raw. The predator's eyes flicked toward him for the briefest instant before slamming its weight against the abomination's chest. The war chief saw it too. From atop a ridge, his staff glowed as he poured every shred of control into his creation. "Break the beast," he roared, his voice amplified through psionic channels. The engineered monster pressed harder, driving the predator into the dirt. Ward didn't hesitate. He vaulted onto a broken crawler, scrambling higher until he could see both beasts locked in blood and fury. "With me," he shouted, not as an order but as a vow. He raised his rifle and fired, each shot aimed at weak joints, drawing the abomination's fury toward himself. The predator seized the opening. With a roar that split the sky, it twisted free and sank its claws deep into the rival's chest. Chitin cracked, ichor sprang across the battlefield. But the abomination thrashed, its tail lashing out, striking the predator with bone-shattering force. The beast reeled, collapsing to one knee, its flank torn and bleeding. Ward's heart clenched. He dropped from the crawler, running headlong into the fray despite every instinct screaming otherwise. "Stay with me," he shouted, firing round after round into the abomination's eyes, its mouth anywhere soft enough to pierce. The creature turned on him, jaws wide. The predator surged up with sudden fury, slamming into its foe before the strike could land. With teeth bared and strength renewed, it ripped into the abomination with unstoppable ferocity, driven not by instinct alone but by something more, by the refusal to let its chosen human fall. The engineered beast shrieked once before collapsing, lifeless, into the dust. The battlefield fell into silence. Rebels raised their weapons high, their cheers rolling like waves across the plain. The predator stood over its fallen rival, chest heaving, blood streaking its hide. It turned to Ward, who was still catching his breath, rifle lowered, hands trembling. Their eyes met, and for the first time Ward felt certainty. Whatever bond tied them was no accident. It was choice, deliberate and undeniable. But the war was far from finished. Above them, council fleets still prowled the skies, and the war chief who had commanded the abomination had not yet fallen. His rage would not fade with one lost beast. Ward climbed atop the wreckage, raising his voice over the rebel cheers. "This was only the beginning," he declared. His words carried across comms, across ships, across desperate hearts. "The council thinks it owns the stars. Today we prove they can bleed. Tomorrow we prove they can fall." The predator roared beside him, a sound that shook the plain and rattled the heavens. It was not a beast's roar but a proclamation, a challenge hurled at every tyrant listening. And somewhere beyond the smoke and wreckage, the war chief's gaze hardened. The next battle would not be fought for territory or pride. It would be fought to decide who ruled the galaxy, man and predator together or the council's iron grip. The council struck back with the precision of a blade. Dreadnoughts descended on rebel worlds, cutting swaths of fire through cities that had barely begun to hope. Their message was simple: rebellion was death. Yet their fear showed in the scale of their fury. The war chiefs no longer saw Elias Ward and the predator as a nuisance. They saw them as a threat great enough to warrant annihilation. Ward stood at the heart of the final stand, aboard a command outpost carved from the ruins of an orbital station. Marcus Hale hovered over the tactical displays, each one blooming with red enemy markers that outnumbered them 10-1. Rebels scrambled in the hangars, loading weapons, sealing armor. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. The predator paced behind Ward like a caged storm, its wounds from the last battle wrapped in bandages that barely held. Its growl was constant, low and resonant, echoing the tension crackling in the room. Ward reached out, resting a hand against its shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of its breath. "One more fight," he murmured, though whether it was to the beast or to himself even he wasn't sure. The council's war chief finally revealed himself as their fleets closed in. His visage filled the holoscreen, tall, armored in ceremonial plates etched with victory centuries old, his eyes burning with the zeal of one who believed he embodied destiny. "You dare to defy order," he said, voice booming across comm channels. "You dare to claim loyalty from what belongs to us. Today I erase you and the galaxy remembers who commands predators, who commands life itself." Ward didn't answer immediately. He studied the enemy commander, then glanced at the predator. The beast growled, a guttural sound that seemed to rattle even the council's fleet through the comm relay. Ward finally spoke, his voice calm and sharp. "You never commanded it. You chained and broke and demanded obedience. That isn't loyalty, it's fear. And fear shatters the moment someone dares to resist. The war chief sneered, cutting the transmission. Moments later, space erupted with light as the fleets engaged. The battle was chaos sculpted into art. Rebel ships darted between massive dreadnoughts, striking like wasps against titans, knowing each sting might be their last. Explosions tore across the void, scattering debris like meteors. The outpost shook under constant bombardment, but Ward refused to retreat. He and Hale directed the chaos with ruthless clarity, pulling victory from impossible odds through daring maneuvers and sheer will. On the ground below, the Predator fought as if the stars themselves watched. Ward led troops into the thickest fighting, rifle hot in his hands, every motion sharp, deliberate. Where he faltered, the Predator was there, ripping apart armored suits, toppling war machines, protecting him with a devotion that defied reason. The soldiers who fought alongside them no longer hesitated to follow. They believed in Ward, in the Predator, in themselves. Belief became armor stronger than steel. Then the war chief himself descended. He strode onto the battlefield encased in living armor, a psionic staff crackling in his grip. Around him, his personal guard carved a swath through rebel lines, their precision and cruelty unmatched. The war chief's voice rolled across the plain, amplified until it was the only sound. Behold what a true commander inspires. Watch your beast bow, human. The Predator stiffened, its body trembling as if invisible chains sought once more to bind it. Ward saw its eyes flicker, its claws hesitate. The war chief was forcing his will upon it, summoning echoes of the leash it had once known. The Predator roared, not with defiance but with pain, its head jerking as though torn between two masters. Ward didn't think. He sprinted across the battlefield, cutting through enemies with brutal efficiency until he stood between the Predator and the war chief. "Look at me," he shouted, voice raw, desperate. The Predator's eyes locked on him, confused, wavering. "You're not his. You never were. You chose me. You fight because you want to, not because you're told. That's what makes you stronger than him." The war chief snarled and drove his staff into the ground. Energy ripped outward, a shockwave that hurled Ward to his knees. He forced himself up, every muscle screaming. Blood ran down his face, but he kept his eyes on the Predator. "With me," he whispered, almost broken. "Always with me." Something shifted in the Predator's gaze. The tremor ceased. The chains, invisible yet suffocating, snapped like brittle glass. With a roar that split the sky, it lunged, not at Ward but at the war chief. The duel was cataclysmic. The Predator struck with unrestrained fury, each blow cracking armor that had endured centuries. The war chief countered with psionic blasts that scorched earth and shattered stone. Ward joined the fray, his shots precise, exploiting every opening the Predator created. Man and beast moved as one, their rhythm unbroken, their bond undeniable. The war chief faltered, disbelief etched across his face as his guard fell, as his armor splintered. "Impossible," he gasped, staggering under the Predator's assault. "No beast chooses a lesser creature over its rightful master." Ward stepped forward, his voice carrying like judgment. "It didn't choose a lesser creature. It chose a partner." The Predator struck the final blow, its claws piercing through the war chief's chest. The psionic staff clattered to the ground, its glow fading as the commander fell lifeless into the dirt. Silence swept the battlefield, then erupted into thunderous cheers as rebel soldiers realized what had happened. The Council's war chief, the unbreakable symbol of dominance, was dead. Above, the dreadnoughts hesitated. Without their commander's iron will, their unity fractured. Rebels pressed the attack, and for the first time, Council fleets retreated. The tide had turned. Ward collapsed to one knee, exhaustion threatening to consume him. The Predator limped forward, lowering itself beside him, its massive head resting against his shoulder. He laughed, a broken, weary laugh, and reached up to stroke its blood-stained hide. "We did it," he murmured. "Not because you followed. Because you stood with me." Hale's voice came through the calm, strained but elated. "Ward, you mad bastard. You just changed the galaxy." Ward stood slowly, leaning against the Predator for strength. He looked out across the battlefield, across the faces of rebels who now stared at him with reverence. He had never asked for command, never sought legend. Yet legend had found him. The Predator raised its head and roared, not in rage but in triumph, a sound that rolled across the stars themselves. And in that roar, the galaxy heard a truth it could never unlearn. The Council's reign was not absolute. Chains could be broken. Loyalty could not be commanded, it could only be earned. Ward turned to his companions, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on him. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning. We fight not because we must but because we choose to. And that choice makes us stronger than they will ever understand. The predator stood taller beside him, its presence a shadow and a light all at once. Together they faced the horizon, where smoke and stars mingled, where a galaxy waited to see what came next. And in that moment, man and beast were no longer predator and human. They were partners, bound not by command but by choice, ready to reshape the universe with their defiance.